Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this edition of the 700 Club. The president said he's going to deport millions of illegal aliens. He's launched a campaign in Orlando, trailing badly in the poll. He's facing 24 Democrats. Many of them are actually beating him in the poll. CBN Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson has the latest early numbers.
President Trump officially jumps in the race today, and if recent polling holds true, he has a lot of ground to make up. Former Vice President Joe Biden not only leads the Democratic field, but he has a 10-point advantage over the president.
And I believe we can win Texas and Florida if you look at the polling data now.
According to a new CBS Battleground poll of early contest states, Joe Biden holds a double-digit lead against Democrat primary opponents, with Senators Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, and Kamala Harris taking the other top spots.
I plan, and if I'm your nominee, winning Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, believe it or not.
CNN reports the Trump campaign severed ties with several pollsters last week after information of internal polls leaked to the press.
If I thought they were correct, I wouldn't be complaining at all.
Those March surveys showed the president trailing Biden by double digits in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, and 7 points in Florida, where Trump will officially announce his re-election campaign Tuesday. Trump's campaign manager, Brad Parscale, dismissed those polls as ancient in a statement, adding the campaign has seen huge swings in the president's favor since March. But even Fox News released a poll Sunday showing Trump trailing behind 5 Democrat candidates in hypothetical matchups.
I frankly don't even believe in pollsters, if you want to know the truth. You just run a campaign, and whatever it is, it is. But I just had a meeting with somebody that's a pollster, and I'm winning everywhere.
Julia Manchester, a congressional reporter for The Hill, noted on Monday's Faith Nation.
These are national polls, and I think one big lesson we learned from 2016 is that national polls don't tell the whole story all the time.
The president laid out his pitch with swing voters to ABC's George Stephanopoulos.
Safety, security, great economy. Frankly, I think we're going to do tremendously now with African Americans, with Asians, with Hispanics, because they have the lowest unemployment numbers they've ever had in the history of the country.
But Democrat candidate Pete Buttigieg disagrees.
We are working very hard to engage people across the party, but especially black voters. We have a moment on our hands when we can do the exact opposite of what the president has done. The president has used identity as a wedge, used race as a wedge to divide people who have common interests.
For now, the 2020 Democrat contenders appear united in going after President Trump instead of each other. That could quickly change as they start facing off in debates next week. Reporting from Washington, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
Thanks, Abigail. Well, they used to tell me the only poll that really counts is the one on Election Day, when you get those real numbers. Up to this point, a lot of polls can be wrong. They sure were wrong the last time in predicting that Hillary Clinton would sweep to the victory when it turned out that Trump won. And I remember that they were talking about there's no path to victory, and I was with John Waggy and our team, and we figured a very clear path to victory in the Midwest, in states like Wisconsin and others, and we were calling that, and listen, Fox News and the others were just totally wrong, and we had the goods, and we knew that Trump was going to win, but it was a clear thing. This time, who knows? Well, on the eve of this campaign, President Trump announced a sweeping new immigration initiative. John Jessup has more on that.
That is right, Pat. President Trump says beginning next week, ICE agents will start deporting millions of migrants living in the United States illegally. In a Monday night tweet, he said they'll be removed as fast as they come in. One administration official says the push will focus on the more than 1 million people who've been ordered by federal judges to leave the country. The president also tweeted that Guatemala is ready to help stem the flow of migrants from Central America, consenting to sign an agreement forcing asylum seekers to make their claims in that country rather than allowing them to travel on through Mexico. No confirmation yet from the government of Guatemala. All this comes as migrants detained at the U.S. border is slowing. The number of family units dropping by about 13% in June. Border officials believe the decrease may come in response to Mexico working to stop the flow of migrants into its country. While the U.S. is sending 1,000 additional troops to the Middle East. Acting Defense Secretary Patrick Shanahan saying the new forces will bolster security to protect against land, sea, and air-based threats, as well as provide more intelligence and surveillance. The news comes as Iran is threatening to exceed limits on uranium enrichment, breaking its agreement and stepping one step closer to making a nuclear weapon. The State Department said the threats amount to what's called nuclear extortion. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo adding that the Trump administration doesn't want war, but is prepared to do what's necessary to keep Iran from developing a nuclear weapon.
The president will consider everything we need to do to make sure, right? What's the president said? We don't want Iran to get a nuclear weapon. The previous administration put them on a pathway that virtually guaranteed that they could get there. So we withdrew from the ridiculous JCPOA and are moving ourselves towards a set of policies which will convince Iran to behave simply like a normal nation.
Meanwhile, the Defense Department is releasing new images of what it says are Iranian boats removing a mine from one of the tankers attacked in the Gulf of Oman last week. Iran denies any involvement in those attacks. Well, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is calling on the Trump administration to end its trade war with China, warning tariffs could cost $1 trillion over the next 10 years. The country's largest business group wants existing tariffs reversed and the proposed tariffs on $300 billion in Chinese goods called off. This as more than 600 other companies and trade associations, including Walmart and Target, signed a letter addressed to the U.S. Trade Representative's office. The businesses say there are better alternatives that wouldn't hurt the American economy. Trump has already imposed 25% tariffs on more than $250 billion of goods from China. Pat, back to you.
You know, they say tariffs are a blunt weapon, and they don't really accomplish what you need to do because it's tit for tat. They raise tariffs, we raise tariffs, so you have what looks like a trade war. The biggest problem with China is the theft of intellectual property. They are stealing us blind. And every company that goes to do business in China is forced to turn over all kinds of confidential information to the Chinese, which in turn use that to create very, very sophisticated devices that they in turn use against us. That's where the deal needs to be, and they need to squeeze on China. China, as big as it is very vulnerable. The Chinese economy is not really as robust as they want to make us believe, and they are really would be amenable to some serious pressure. But I think pressure with tariffs is the wrong way to go, but maybe the president needed a blunt weapon, and that's what he felt he had to use. John?
Well, Pat, speaking of China, Hong Kong's leader is backing down in the face of huge protests over her support of an extradition agreement with China. But as Dale Hurd reports, there is still concern mainland China is determined to steadily chip away at Hong Kong's freedoms.
An extradition bill that would have sent criminal suspects to communist China for prosecution seems to be dead for now. But Hong Kong's student protest movement against the heavy-handed rule of Beijing has come back to life. Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam has apologized for the extradition bill that set off the massive protests, but said she would not resign. This after millions turned out to protest what they believe to be an attempt by China to further erode their independence. As a British colony, Hong Kong had political, religious, and economic freedom, and it grew into one of the major financial powerhouses in the world. When the UK turned Hong Kong over to China in 1997, those freedoms were supposed to be protected, but residents see the extradition law as one of a series of attempts to take them away.
The extradition law will really is a threat to the judicial and legal independence of Hong Kong from mainland China.
The last British governor of Hong Kong, Chris Patten, said the West needs to stand up to Chinese attempts to demolish what he called the firewall between Hong Kong and mainland China.
We should make it clear that this is not a policy or a succession of policies which we're prepared to stand by and ignore.
Some have characterized the conflict between China and Hong Kong as a conflict between communism and Christianity. And an unofficial anthem of the protest was Sing Hallelujah to the Lord. A key protest leader who is a Christian, Joshua Wong, says China's extradition plan has blown up in its face, reigniting the protest movement against the dictatorial rule from China.
Beijing and Carrie Lam transform whole generation of youngsters from normal citizen to dissident. That's the price that Beijing must pay.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says Hong Kong will be on the agenda when President Trump meets with Chinese President Xi at the G20 summit in 10 days.
The president's always been a vigorous defender of human rights. He's going to get the opportunity, I think, to see President Xi in just what'll be a couple of weeks now in Osaka, Japan at the G20 summit. I'm sure this will be among the issues that they discuss.
Optimists will see in this protest victory the hope that Hong Kong residents can stand up to China. But pessimists have long predicted that democracy in Hong Kong would eventually die after the 1997 handover to China, and that it's only a matter of time. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Thanks, Dale. A new Supreme Court decision is being called a win for religious freedom. CBN News has told you about the Kleins, two Oregon bakers who were fined for refusing to make a cake for a gay wedding. The legal fight over the case went all the way to the High Court, which threw out a previous ruling against the Kleins, sending the case back down to a federal court in Oregon. The justices say that court needs to reconsider the case in light of a more recent ruling in favor of a Colorado baker who refused to make a cake for a same-sex wedding. Kelly Shackelford, chief counsel to First Liberty, who represented the Kleins, calls the decision a victory for the religious liberty of all Americans, saying, quote, "The Constitution protects speech, popular or not, from condemnation by the government. The message from the court is clear. Government hostility towards religious Americans, Pat, will not be tolerated."
Well, I think those decisions are good. I hope they stand with them. The court really, John Roberts was a strong conservative. The American Center for Law and Justice had worked on cases with him. He was a good friend, and we were very happy to see the way he was going. But it looks like he has begun to waver somewhat in his conservative views on things, and we're just not sure where the court is going these days. We thought there was a clear conservative majority with Gorsuch and Kavanaugh on the bench along with John Roberts. We don't know for sure right now, but anyhow, there'll be another appointment, and when that one comes, believe me, there'll be fireworks.